So a very warm welcome today to this very special webinar that is to actually look at different aspects of the impact of COVID-19 on higher education, and as well to look at the various aspects that we actually have been taken up in the IAU Global Survey version 2 on the impact of COVID-19 on higher education. We did send out messages around the world to the 20,000 higher education institutions in the World Higher Education Database that we maintain at the International Association of Universities. And so we hope that many people will pick up the opportunity to participate in this global study on the impact midterm of COVID-19 on higher education. We believe that the situation has evolved quite substantially from where it started back in March, and maybe not, but we will see. So let me introduce myself very quickly. My name is Ilij van 't Land, and I'm pleased to be the Secretary General of the International Association of Universities to welcome very esteemed colleagues from around the world. Professor Laszlo Gurgley, who's the Director International Education at the Budapest University of Technology and Economics in Hungary. You will be addressing the issue of governance and finances and the impact of COVID-19 on these very essential parts of university life. Then we're very pleased to welcome Professor Sizwe Mabizela, who's the Vice Chancellor of Rhodes University in South Africa. And we're very pleased that you agreed to speak to us on the very important aspects of teaching and learning, and there as well on the disruptions, the challenges, and the opportunities. And then we will welcome José Ramón Eguibar, who's the General Director for Research at BUAP University in Mexico, who will be speaking about research. And then we welcome Professor Khalid Al-Khanji, who's the Chief Strategy and Development Officer at Qatar University in Qatar. And you will be speaking more specifically on community engagement. So 4 different aspects of the various impacts of higher education, on higher education by the current pandemic. We are launching this second global survey, but it is called the second one because there was a first one. And I hope that many of the attendees and participants will have the opportunity to also look at the outcomes of the first global survey. And here, let me go to a little presentation because that's the backdrop against which we will look at the impact midterm. So I hope it comes up. Yes, the first global survey was a global survey that we launched right at the beginning of what became the global pandemic. The COVID-19 impacts had started earlier, but it really hit the world full-fledged in a full-fledged manner really in February, March, we would say. And that's where we drafted and designed a first global survey report to try and say right at the start what was happening when it comes to higher education. The reactions to it were very contrasted. Some said, but how can you have a survey right now when we're in such a crisis? And do you think this is the time to collect the information? And yes, it was the time to collect proper information so that today we can move to a second survey and also see what has changed already over time. And so it was contrasted in the sense that still 424 universities from 111 countries did participate in the survey and provided for high quality data that we could analyze and report on in a publication made available in May. That publication is available online for anybody who wishes to also benchmark the situation against what was happening then and over time. And we invited colleagues and organizations from around the world to also respond to this global survey with more information at the regional level. And that's where we first in the survey had regional breakdowns and information on Africa, on the Americas, on Asia, and the Pacific, and on Europe. And we also later had a specific input from the regions on several regions from around the world. So we tried to really analyze the situation and understand. This global survey was initiated with members of the IAU staff, and you will see later here on the screen as well Giorgio Marinoni, who is the author, the main author of the publication, and as well Trine Jensen appears in the participants list, who was very actively involved as well, in particular on the digital transformation of higher education. And then for the, let me see, yes, here. So the first global survey report did touch on several aspects, and more specifically on teaching and learning, on the impacts on student mobility, on research, and on collaboration. And what was of importance there was to see already that what we know today and what we see still is that higher education institutions had to pivot online and to transform their teaching into something that was called online teaching at a distance. But it was crisis management of at the time and of the situation. And it very often was the best way that everybody found to continue education, which was the most important thing to do, obviously. And we will see, hopefully, in the second global survey and the responses we will receive, that the quality of the online teaching and learning processes have improved over time, and that universities have been able to address this very important aspect of the transformation of the last month in a very constructive way. Yet this said, if 67% of higher education institutions shifted online, 24 at the time had suspended activities to develop solutions. And today we expect to see that many more universities actually have opted for the online version and pivoted online fully in not only teaching and research, but many other activities. At the time as well, 7% reported that they had canceled teaching altogether because they didn't have the means, either technically or not even the means when it comes to pedagogies. And that is a very important aspect that is impacting heavily today on the quality of education. And 2% reported they were not affected. And we know for one that it's some universities that were operating a lot already online, and those who were very rapidly able to use all the means that were at their disposal to change to online teaching and learning. 89% reported also impact on student mobility, and that we know it's stopped basically. So students could not take part in international mobility initiatives anymore, and many of them were actually also grounded in countries where they had taken international studies, and that generated a different set of challenges that still today many universities are dealing with. 60% had increased virtual mobility or collaborative online learning as an alternative. And that as well is improving over time. And we hope that we will be able to say that in the second global survey, but also hear from our esteemed speakers. In terms of research and collaboration, 80% reported a heavy impact on research and said that it was mainly negative. And that means that many said that research became very difficult and that the researchers had to reinvent themselves, and even the research mechanism and strategies had to be adapted. And we will hear more about that hopefully as well. So at the same time, the expert in the higher education research and expertise is valued by governments, and that is something new because it's a unique opportunity for universities around the world to also show better that they matter, that they are part of the solution and the solution building and the grounds to be created and fostered in order to generate the kind of solutions for the future of education at large, higher education in particular, and the development of society. So the launch of the second global survey was already envisaged when we started the first one. This is a series of 3. So a first one right at the start, a second one today, and a third one a little later on into the future, when we hope we will be beyond the pandemic. not beyond the crisis, not beyond the impacts, but beyond the pandemic itself, and hopefully in not too far a future for everyone around the world. So we developed it again on the basis of the input from the first global survey, and we developed it as well together with colleagues from around the world. The Association of Indian Universities, the Agence Universitaire de la Francophonie, the European University Association, the Hungarian Rectors Conference, the Association of International Educators in the US, NAFSA, the Association of Commonwealth Universities based with headquarters in the UK but operating globally, and then the United Nations universities, and in particular then their Institute for Advanced Studies of Sustainability. So they helped improve from the first version, and also we hope included or helped us include all the questions that people ask themselves around the world. So the launch was yesterday in terms of the letters going out to the membership, 650 member universities and organizations from around the world. It also went out to the 20,000 higher education institutions in the World Higher Education Database in 3 languages, in English, in French, and in Spanish. And we have many intermediary organizations that will pick it up and help us share the news about the global survey. And we hope that as many universities as possible will see it as a priority to also participate in it and help attract or help extract the right information on the state of the impact today. So the consultation is quite comprehensive, and it is institution-wide, and we will look at governance and financing, and that's why we have that as a topic here. It will look at teaching and learning, a topic again for this webinar, at research, and at societal and community engagement. We will invite all the universities to nominate a coordinator at the institutional level to gather input across the institution and ensure that only one reply per institution is being provided. So it's a little bit of an exercise at the beginning, but maybe also a very nice opportunity to generate a whole of institution approach even to the impact of COVID-19 on the particular institution taking part, because they will work across the institution, gather the information, and thus complete the questionnaire on the basis of the information received. This will allow to have a real good picture of what happens around the world. My colleague Giorgio Marinoni in particular will be available to answer any question that people may have as far as that mechanism is concerned. So participation is essential because we obviously want to gather evidence-based data on the impact of COVID-19 at the global level, inform the different regions. We will also be able to disaggregate information per region, and we will be able to share that with everybody and anybody interested. And what is important to notice as well is that the report that will result from this global endeavor will help inform the UNESCO World Higher Education Conference that will take place in October 2021 in Barcelona, in principle, face-to-face. We hope that will be possible. So the impacts will be, in terms of a report that will be published, it will be picked up by many organizations around the world. It will allow to echo other dynamics that exists, but it will be the only global endeavor of the kind. So we hope to see many of you take part. There are many resources that you may wish to look at a later stage. This PowerPoint presentation will be made available, and the links will be accessible to all of you. We will also share it to all those who are registered for the webinar itself. So I'm very pleased to now give the floor to Giorgio Marinoni, who will take over from here and moderate the session. And I look forward to hearing the 4 excellent speakers that we have with us today. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ilie. It's a pleasure for me being here and moderate this excellent panel of very well-renowned speakers. And without further ado, I would like to call Dr. Laszlo Gurgley to start sharing his perspective on governance and finance of universities in this time of COVID-19 disruptions. Dr. Laszlo, the floor is yours.
A second, I'm going to share my screen. Hope you can see it and you can hear me. All right. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the introduction and also for the invitation by IAU. It is my pleasure to be here and provide this presentation. So I'm Laszlo Gurgley, Director for International Education at the Budapest University of Technology and Economics, Budapest, Hungary. On behalf of our institute and on behalf of Dr. Balázs Nagy, Vice Rector, I will give you here a short presentation on the influence of the coronavirus pandemic situation on our institute's governance and finance. So the main topic is going to be the governance and finance. But before going into details, first I would like to briefly introduce ourselves to let you know who we are, and in order to make it clear and understandable what level and amount of measures we had to take due to the pandemic situation. Our institute, BME, is a prestigious higher education institute with a quite long tradition in Hungary, founded in 1782. Anyway, the university is located in a beautiful environment in the heart of the capital, Budapest. And we can proudly state that BME is definitely the best technical university in Hungary and one of the best in Central Europe. We have 8 faculties, 70 departments, where more than 1,300 academic staff is working. We do have hundreds of programs at BSc, MSc, OTM, one master, and PhD level. 51 of them are available in English. We have more than 20,000 students, and thanks to the developments in English programs and due to the new Hungarian scholarship program called Stipendium Hungaricum program managed by the Hungarian government, we have doubled the number of international students in the last 5 years, now exceeding 10% or nearly reaching 15% of the total student number. Although majority of our programs are engineering and informatics oriented, they are in good synergy and strong relation with 2 non-engineering specific fields. One faculty is belonging to natural sciences and one is related to economical and social sciences. Thanks to the high-level practice-oriented undergraduate programs built on a general basis and a subsequent innovation-driven master's program, graduating students have a wide range of opportunities in the job market. And the university's mission, anyway, inseparable from the education, is to cultivate the sciences, to make scientific research, which encompasses fundamental and applied research, technological product and service development, and the exploitation of results making up the innovation chain. BME as a research university identifies 7 major priority research areas, starting from artificial intelligence, smart cities, robotics, intelligent environment, sustainable energy, vehicle technology, autonomous driving, biotechnology, nanophysics, disaster prevention. And just since last year, from 1st of November, BME is also a member of European University Alliance called ELISA, which was a new initiative with the European Union. What was, then going into the details, what was the effect of the COVID on the governance at our institute? As for the crisis management, an important very first action was that BME, immediately after the appearance of the virus, early March in 2020, established a special task force named Coordination Committee in order to introduce the required measures. The committee is composed of leaders and operative directors of the university. There were several measures, safety measures, measures on educations and education activities and research activities, partially because of the measures brought by the government, and we were also introducing some kind of corrective measures just to before the national lockdown, just to increase the efficiency of education and increase the safety during this special pandemic situation. So anyway, we had the first, we can say, lockdown starting in March, and then by the beginning of summer, it seemed that we survived the first peak. We survived the first wave of the virus. Even though we had a very nice summer, we were also preparing for the second wave, which was expected to come in the autumn, and anyway it came. Even though we did not really have much time in the spring, we could somehow develop, we could somehow transform into the online or distance education that was required due to the lockdown. So an important effect was that the digitalization of education management and administration processes were accelerated. We did have some digitalization strategy before the coronavirus pandemic situation, and we already started the implementation of it. But definitely we can say, if I can say that there was any benefit of the COVID effects, that in such unfortunate event, that it was accelerating the digitalization of these fields. For the digital education, the tools were defined. Practically the whole university, all the faculties are now using Microsoft Teams and Moodle for the education. We also do have some platform for the administration, education administration, and other types of administration. So now a very large portion of all our processes can be completed in online platform. Another important impact was that the home office as an option, which was practically did not exist before the coronavirus situation, and now it's an option. Basically, all of our instructors, lecturers can work from home, and also for the administrative staffs, there are some kind of partial home office option. I would like to mention one more thing here, is that about the reaction time. Reaction time meaning that when we needed to change from the presential education to the distance education, at the very first time in the spring, we needed a little bit longer time to be prepared for it. More than a week elapsed that after the decision of this changing, and there was some weeks of we can say transformation period, during which we were just gaining the experience, and we were trying to develop everything that are required for the education. On the contrary, the autumn, since we were already very well prepared, then this changing could be done within a very, very short period. Regarding finance, normally or in general, BME's funds are partially state funds, because we are a state university. So approximately half of the budget is coming from the state, and the other half are own revenues. During this pandemic situation, there was a little decrease in the state financing, so we needed to have a recalculation of the institute budget. But this small reduction was compensated by the fact that the number of research calls coming from Hungarian funds and EU tenders are increased, and also the income from the industry and income from the tuition fee were a little bit increasing. So we can say that the budget is stable, which was also supported by the fact that the expenses were decreasing due to the lockdown. This is an unfortunate fact that basically many of our services, like the gym or library or whatever, they needed to close for this period, and accordingly the expenses were decreased. I mentioned the tuition fees, and the related topic is the number of students, which basically defines that what is the budget and how the university can work and can survive during this period. We can say that the number of Hungarian students is stable. There were no any decrease, and actually we're going to have the admission period very soon for the next semester, and we expect some increase in the number of students. Regarding international students, unfortunately the number of fee-paying students were a little bit reduced during the last year, but it seems that it was just a temporary reduction, because the applications for the spring semester in 2021 actually we experienced a very drastic increase. Also, we have an increased number of scholarship applications. I mentioned this program of the Stipendium Hungaricum managed by the Hungarian government. And of course, the mobility number is drastically reduced. The Erasmus program, practically it went down to 50% of the typical ratio. But applications for the next period is relatively high. Finally, a few words about the partnerships, which was really affected by this COVID situation. We can say that thanks to these online platforms and online tools, the direct hardware task handling projects and meetings, we can deal with them very effectively. Of course, these types of communications and outreaches has some pros and contras, which anyway primarily depend on this efficiency. Primarily depends or correlates with the relation proximity. Which means that with odd context, with closer context, this work could be very efficient. However, networking is complicated by the fact that gaining new context is practically disappeared. It's practically off. At this point, I would like to just mention again that we are now members of the European University Alliance, that we believe it will help us increasing this efficiency in networking. By these words, I would like to conclude my presentation, and thank you very much again being here, and of course it will be my pleasure to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gurgley. Very interesting presentation. I invite all the participants, if they want to ask questions, you can already ask them in the chat, and then after the other three presentations, we will have a question and answer session. So please already share your question in the chat, and then we will address to the speaker. If you want to ask a question to one specific speaker, please also write it in the question. And now I would like to call Professor Mabizela to give us an input on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on teaching and learning. Professor Mabizela, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation to be part of this exciting IAU webinar. And thank you for the introduction. My presentation will focus. Right. Can you hear me, Josh? Okay. My presentation will focus on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on teaching and learning at Rhodes University. I'm certain that the story I'm going to share with you will sound very familiar to many participants in this webinar. So the outline of my presentation is as follows. In the second slide, can we have the second slide, please? The next one. Okay. So the outline is that I will talk very briefly about the contextual background, the arrival of the coronavirus on our shores and what implications that had, and the challenges that we experience, and make some concluding thoughts and observations. So very briefly, our university is a small university, and it has a student population of about 8,600. We are a contact university, and more than half of our students live on university residences. Almost a quarter of our students are postgraduate students pursuing studies towards master's and PhD. And about 20% of our students are international students from across the globe. Our academic year starts in February and it ends in the middle of December. These facts are quite important to understand the kind of challenges that we had to deal with. And our primary mode of teaching and learning is face-to-face. We are a contact university and we are strongly face-to-face in terms of teaching and learning. So following a week of student orientation, our teaching and learning started in earnest on the 10th of February, 2020. And then on the 5th of March, a first case of confirmed novel coronavirus was reported in South Africa. And on the 18th, educational institutions were directed by government to close down in order to contain the spread of the virus. So we had a month and a week of formal face-to-face teaching and learning in 2020. So you can imagine the new first-year students who only had an experience of a little more than a month of being at university. So students had to leave campus at very short notice. They left their belongings, including books, on campus in the hope that they would return to campus within a few weeks. Well, things got worse, and a nationwide lockdown was declared on the 26th of March. And it became clear that a return to campus activities would not be possible any sooner. So like many universities in our country and elsewhere in the world, we needed to ensure continuity of the education of our students and a productive use of their time towards building their futures, while observing the nationwide lockdown regulations, which were intended to slow the spread of the virus. So on the one hand, we had to ensure the academic progress and success of our students, and on the other, that our students and staff, including our surrounding community, were not exposed to the risk of contracting the deadly virus. So we established a teaching and learning continuity task team, which was led by our Deputy Vice Chancellor responsible for academic affairs, in order to ensure that there is continuity in teaching and learning. And we had to prepare for and implement emergence remote teaching and learning. See, while we had always used technology to support face-to-face teaching and learning, we now had to rely almost exclusively on digital technology to carry out online teaching and learning. This was an unfamiliar territory for both our staff and our students. We anchored our plan and our strategy and implementation of emergency remote teaching and learning on two fundamental principles. First, we had to ensure that no student would be left behind. And secondly, we had to ensure that all decisions we made and all actions we took had to be underpinned by a commitment to advance social justice. So these were the two fundamental principles that underpinned our approach to remote teaching and learning. So in line with these principles, we committed to ensuring that all our students were able to complete the 2020 academic year, and that those who, for one reason or another, were not able immediately to engage with emergency remote teaching and learning, that they would be assisted to catch up using printed learning materials and other means. We further committed that once the risk of the COVID-19 pandemic had sufficiently receded and we were able to resume face-to-face teaching and learning, we would run intensive revision and catch-up classes so as to ensure that all our students were able to reach the same level that all others had reached. So towards the end of April, we ran a 2-week orientation program for both academic and students on the use of online teaching and learning support systems. And on the 4th of May, we officially launched into emergency remote teaching and learning. So what kind of challenges did we experience? Again, this will probably sound eerily familiar to most of you. The challenges of access to digital devices, such as laptops and tablets, stable and reliable access to internet connectivity, access to and affordability of mobile data bundles, were always going to loom large in our transition to digital or online course delivery. So right from the outset, we were cognizant of the issues of debilitating poverty, deprivation, and systemic and deeply embedded inequalities, and the extent to which these would create a significant barrier in our implementation of emergency remote teaching and learning. Some of our students live in socioeconomic circumstances that are less than conducive to any meaningful learning to take place. So insofar as devices are concerned, the first thing that we did when we decided to switch on to remote teaching and learning was to conduct a survey among our students to get a sense of who had what kind of device. And it turned out a significant number did not have laptops. And so we purchased and sent these to the students. Those who had indicated that they needed one, we delivered one to them. But of course, there were other challenges around that. Mobile data bundles, as I've mentioned. We had to negotiate with the mobile network operators to provide reduced rates in order to provide support to our students. Inaccessible rural areas, they pose a significant challenge. Now you can talk about delivering laptops and printed materials, but if you have students living in inaccessible remote rural areas, it's incredibly difficult. There are areas that do not have electricity. So having a laptop and access to data bundles is little comfort. So how do you deal with those things? As noted earlier, our strength is in face-to-face teaching and learning delivery modality. So reworking and adapting for emergence or remote online delivery, materials that had been prepared for face-to-face teaching and learning was nothing short of a Herculean task. Pedagogical competencies and approaches for online teaching and learning are different to those required for face-to-face teaching and learning. Performing online assessments was a significant challenge. We ran timed closed book online assessments for most of our courses, and the issues of academic integrity needed particular attention. Supporting our international students who were outside the borders of South Africa was a particularly vexing challenge because the borders were closed. We could not send them any laptop. We couldn't deal with issues of data and so on and so forth. But remember, we committed ourselves to ensuring that as soon as they're able to come back on campus, we would do our best to bring them up to speed. And of course, on those who are in rural areas, we made sure that when the opportunity arose, they were the first to come back in order to benefit on the university Wi-Fi, and they were able to get up to speed. Just some concluding thoughts. The transition to and adapting to emergency remote teaching and learning was difficult for both students and academic staff. Students and academic staff complained of stress, anxiety, and burnout. And these feelings were further compounded by the uncertainty and fear of living under the ever-present threat of the virus. Counseling services were made available to both our students and staff to address these and other mental challenges. Now, in order to participate meaningfully and productively in remote or online teaching and learning, a student must have a high level of self-discipline. They must be self-motivated. They must be well-organized. And they must have a highly developed sense of purpose and must have excellent time management skills. In short, a student must be able to take a full responsibility and exercise agency for their learning. It's not something that can be taken lightly. It is challenging. Regular communication with students is essential to constantly reassure them. And that's what our academic staff had to do. We have performed a comparative analysis on student performance, comparing the 2020 results to the past 3 years. They have done better in some courses and they have done worse in others. So there isn't a good way to compare this. There is no gainsaying that COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the pace of digital transformation. With all its many advantages, technology has severe limitations. It has a severe limitation in respect of some disciplines, such as mathematical sciences, such as those disciplines that have experiments attached to them. You can't use technology, I can't see how you can use technology in the performing arts, for example. So it has limitations. Technology can never replace face-to-face interaction. We are social beings, and learning is more than just the transmission of knowledge. It is a formation of a young person. So that physical proximity plays a critical role in the students' learning experience. Students want to engage each other, and they want to engage their lecturer in close proximity to one another. Interactive learning activities, including group discussions, play a significant role in the learning, development, and growth of a student. While some of these can be organized using technology and chat rooms and so on, nothing replaces physical interaction. Emergency remote teaching and learning is primarily about the delivery of course content to the students through digital modalities. This modality has extremely limited capacity to contribute to the holistic development and growth of students. The risk of relying solely on technology is that we will produce graduates who are highly skilled and technically competent, but lack in human and interpersonal skills. There will be nothing but robots. While we cannot return to exclusively face-to-face teaching and learning, in my view, the future is strongly hybrid or blended learning approach. Finally, despite its massive devastation in human and economic costs, the COVID-19 pandemic has played a significant catalytic role in forcing us to pause, reflect, rethink, and reimagine our societies and the world in which we live. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation, Professor Mabizela, and sharing with us this very important reflection also for the future. We'd like now to move on and pass the floor to Professor Eguibar. Professor Eguibar will talk about the impact of COVID-19 on research, another very important aspect of university missions. Professor Eguibar, the floor is yours.
Autónoma de Puebla, the Autonomous University of Puebla. Puebla is a city that is quite close to the central district, to the Mexico City, and we have a long tradition, as you can see here in our seal, since 1578 to nowadays, where they are one of the first universities founded by the Spanish conquerors until now. I will talk about the impact of coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, on research, and with my colleague Ricardo Villegas, we try to put the slides in an order that give us the challenge, but also the opportunities that offer this pandemic disease and all the consequences on learning in general and particularly in research. Let me just put to you that our university is a research university. It's a global university with more than 100,000 students. We have mainly from the Americas, from Latin American states and Canada, but we are in the process to be a global university with the students from all around the world. It's the third largest university in Mexico, the so-called autonomous state universities is a similar conception as in the States, with this California system, state of California, where here we have, each state have this kind of autonomous universities. We offer the degrees of bachelor, master in science, and PhD, and one of the strong areas is research in practically all fields of knowledge. May I the next slide, please? One of the big challenges that were took immediately after the pandemic was the troubles associated with the money. A lot of research grants were delayed in the money support, or in other cases, the objectives and aid that you have with the work were delayed due to the lockdown that in here in our university started in March 19. this condition was well addressed by Science and Nature magazines, for example, journals that analyze this kind of challenges that we have when doing research. The other thing is very important, that is the complications of laboratory access. Until now, our university, we are not allowed to stay in the laboratory. We are now in the process to, after this second or third peak in Mexico was very peculiar because the lockdown was partial, so the number of cases of coronavirus are quite stable along the time, no, along of this full year. So we are expecting that in March we are able to return to the laboratories and start to work again. So there is 1 year of delay in general for the students that are doing the master's or PhD thesis. But we thought also that there is possible to create opportunities, but basically through the innovative solutions related to the public health. A lot of countries, we are now hearing one case from Africa, one case from Europe, and we are hearing next about the Middle East and in the Americans, in the Latin American part. And we thought that there is possible to obtain resources, for example, for new vaccination techniques, or in order to detect the new variants of COVID-19, of the coronavirus, that are quite important, because vaccination, the success of vaccinations depends of these new variants. For example, from Britain, South Africa, and Brazil are able to fight. No, the vaccine is effective to produce an immune response that is adequate to the new variants. May I the next slide, please? The other aspect is we are talking about that the COVID-19 produced an abrupt change in our lives. Particularly, the universities go to this distance teaching, digital teaching, that is not the same as Dr. Mavicella talked us. It's quite difficult. We need to interact with the students. We need to interact with other persons that help us in the process of learning. And when you are doing research, these effects are higher, because you need to interact, to teach, to the use of the equipments, etc. In some cases, animal preparations, or if you are doing research in the university hospital, the interaction with the patients, etc., etc. So now we are in a high demand, a competition among the scientists. That's a situation previous to the COVID-19, but I think it is clearly now deeper. No, there are now more conditions that put you in a strong competitions between the scientists, but also it's an opportunity to learn new ways of collaborations. This webinar, organized by the International Association of University, is just one example of that condition. No, so these new circumstances apply to all of us, and it will be present, I think, for the next 5 years, independently of the amount of vaccines that we apply. So we need to learn something like an hybrid stage, some part digital, some part as used to be. This is quite important in order to change not only the way that we think, but also the way that we teach the students to deal with this situation. The next slide, please. We saw some resource, and not all the institutions that have research capabilities are able to work with in the field of virology, no? Particularly with this type of coronavirus, or with the COVID disease, or vaccines. So I think it's important to promote the research on base of the capability of each higher education institution. This is quite important. Try to reinforce the fields in which you are stronger. It doesn't matter if there is physics or sociology or whatever. It is quite important that the authorities of each university detect the strong fields in each university and try to promote it independently of this new situation in order to emerge after this situation in stronger conditions in these particular stronger fields. So the pandemic circumstance has shown us to foresee fast change when doing research. I think that is quite important aspect to learn about during this process of we are suffering the pandemic. Uh, Also, there are important things, for example, to respond quicker to the social demands using scientific perspective. One of them is obviously the information, the pandemic of fake news that are quite important and the general population are confused and some in some instances take not the adequate decisions. So we thought, Ricardo and myself and the authorities of the university, that it's quite important this kind of social service. Use the university to diffuse the information that is validate, scientific validate, in order to have the better response from the general perspective. For example, try to mitigate this anti-vaccine movement that is stronger nowadays in practically all parts of the world. The next slide is, please. The other things is obviously we need to adapt to the work, including virtual and I call face-to-face work. No, in the case of research, this is a nodal point. You need to talk with the students to see where are the way that they are doing the things in order to have reliable data that we are able to publish in reputed journals around the world. So we insisted that the opportunities, for example, to develop new research areas inside the university, especially those that's interdisciplinary. COVID-19 teach us that we need to resolve, yes, also the genetic material of the virus, from that point to very specific, to the production of vaccines using, for example, the RNA technique, but also to the social, to all the people, for example, to combine the vaccination, to give information, as I told you, about the real information, the scientific information, and also to see scientific solution of no troubles. The pandemic is evolving along with us, along the world, and we need to share information that now in this webinar that help us to confront efficiently from the social point of view, as I told you, but also from the beginning, no, from the virus itself, from the coronavirus itself. And also, a very important aspect is to prepare us for the future. This will be another pandemic. It is obviously, and we need to change a lot of behaviors that were common before the start of this new disease. May I the next slide, please? Is the last one. One of these is this kind of teleconference or virtual work that improve, for example, research collaboration, but not in all research areas, particularly those that require, as I told you, laboratory or field activities. Here there are a lot of anthropology, sociology, agronomics need to go to the outside world of the university in order to do research. This is quite important also to take into account in each university in order, as I told you, to improve the quality of research that we are doing. But also there is an opportunity. We are all able to address new research in key areas. For example, public health, that COVID shows us it's quite important, and most of the country diminished the amount of money dedicated to the public health instead to treat just treat the patients. Also, nowadays, the climate change, it's a very good notice that the new president of the United States of America returned to the Paris Agreement, and now climate will be one of the special agenda for all the world and also for the university. Of course, what we are doing with the national resources. This coronavirus came from bats and from pangolins, and these we are the humans that we are going into areas that normally we are not doing anything there. So the virus spread easily. We have several examples: HIV, Ebola, and now coronavirus. So we need to restore the natural areas, and obviously this must be doing with the interdisciplinary perspective. That's quite important. We need to change this, and us as a part of university and teaching young people, we need to share this kind of information in order to change the attitudes of the youngsters, but also our own attitudes related to the planet and related to the climate. So at the end, I want to thank again for this webinar. I think it's quite important to share information with all the colleagues around the world, and we have some conclusions. To do research under an international approach is being more efficient and cost-effective while generating maximum social value. And the social value, obviously, are our students, our master and PhD students, with a global perspective that will help us to pass through this pandemic and to be a better citizens of the world. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Eguibar, and thank you very much also for concluding your presentation with a very nice transition to the next speaker and the next topic, because Professor Alkanji will speak about social engagement, and which is a very important aspect of the university life. So, Professor Alkanji, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to participate in this very interesting, very important webinar with my esteemed colleagues. I come from Qatar University. Qatar University is the national university of Qatar. It's a public institution, the biggest in the country. We have more than 22,000 students in 10 different colleges. And we were fortunate that relatively recently, we developed a new and thriving health education sector that comprised of 4 different colleges, namely pharmacy, medical school, health sciences, and most recently the dental school. They were very thriving, very new. Our medical school has yet to graduate its first cohort by the end of next year. But we were, in our normal way of operation up until March here in Qatar. And when the pandemic hit us, and we had to transfer everything online, we could not continue doing our different activities that aimed at the public as usual. We had also to think differently, realize and evaluate actually what we can do and we cannot do, and how can we think differently. So what we try to do basically trying to adjust to the new reality, then trying to understand our strength that could be utilized in this new situation, and then seizing this opportunity to engage with the society and community and different organizations, governmental and non-governmental organizations. So I would describe our engagements as two parts. One directly related to pandemic itself and the activities around it, and other also activities. For the first part, the COVID-related activities, our health sector, our health education sector, the 4 colleges played very important role. They were really engaged by their professors, by their students, by the GAs, researchers, with different organizations, especially the Ministry of Health. And when I say engaged, that really joined, the different people joined with their expertise, different working groups and steering committees, and people on the ground, whether in tracing and testing, studying the spread of the virus, and also testing clinical and doing clinical trials in hospitals. In addition to that, also because we are the main university of the country, and we have young population that are now have a lot of free time in their hand, and we can tap on them to volunteer in different activities. At the same time, we have very strong Center for Civic Engagement, Leadership and Volunteerism that have a strong network among our students and beyond the community. So we became, Qatar University, with the leadership of this center, became the headquarters of volunteers for the whole country during the pandemic, especially the first few months where there were needs for too many volunteers to do many different things, like being stationed in a different position in the country, making sure that people are aware of the dangers and what they should do and what kind of health behavior that they should follow to curb the spread of the virus among the population when they do their own things. So basically we work with recruiting those volunteers, whether from our own students, and of course because they're young people, so have their own friends and friends of friends, then they kind of bring with them. So basically we expanded beyond our students to the larger community, and also we provided them with the necessary training. In addition, I think we showed that how we can conduct our business in a new environment. Most the teaching was online, different engagement were online, but when it comes to volunteer, they have to be in the headquarters at some point of time, conduct a training, some gathering, some meeting. But we were able to show that actually we can do this while maintaining the necessary measures, like keeping the necessary hygiene practices, keeping social distancing, keeping maximum number of people in an enclosed space at that time. And I was happy to go to several places and see our students and our volunteers talking to the people, of course, encouraging others to wear masks, and activities like this. So these are the kind of things directly related to COVID. On the other hand, also, people in the population, especially during the few months of almost total lockdown, had a lot of time in their hand. They went and watched almost every series in Netflix and everything, and they still have a good amount of time in their hands. And that wasn't our opportunity. Let's give them something useful. So we moved our continuing education online. We started offering even some free workshops. People were able to join, and many people who were not joining us before took 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different workshops because they basically were sitting at home and they wanted to do something useful with their time. And some of these things related directly also to the pandemic to some way or another, but also we engaged in different things like any topic of interest to the public, whether something in history, something in politics, some societal issues, and people were there more than ever attending those seminar, webinars, workshops, and what have you. We continued even beyond giving seminars. For example, when it comes to social activities, usually these are done in social and sport activities, done in with a big number of people. But we were able to hold some events online, give them information utilizing the different platforms. And we were really fortunate. And we have to say that we were fortunate that the population here in Qatar have very high level of internet penetration. I think more than 95%, if I'm not mistaken. The capability at the university also, the technical capability at the university was really helpful, and the speed of the internet really helped us. In sum, the most important thing for us really was to be able to adapt, to understand the requirement and the new restriction that we have in our hand, and also the capabilities. And I think we were able to showcase what we have beyond the campus of QU to the larger communities, especially, as I said again, with the thriving healthy cluster that's young. People start recognizing it, but when they saw our people going out, working with different groups, conducting workshops, raising awareness, that was really gained. I think that we can build on beyond. Hopefully, when things come, when return to normal functioning, we can build on them. Yes, we lost the human touch. That's unfortunate, but this is the reality of our time at this time. But the most important thing for us is, even internally, for the things that we could not go out and do them as usual, we still plan. We utilize the time to review our plans, so we will be ready when life goes back to normal. With these brief remarks, I would conclude, and thank you so much again for giving me this opportunity to participate.
Thank you very much, Professor Al-Kanji, for a very interesting overview of all the activities you have done for society in Qatar. And we're very happy to hear that also your students were really looking forward for that and very active. And now for the question and answer session, first of all, I invite you to pose more questions because we receive only one so far. But I will give back the floor to Ilige to moderate this session. She might also have some questions for you. So Ilige, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, let me also thank you for this wonderful panel. I really thank you for this beautiful complementarity. I'm sure you consulted behind the scenes among yourselves. It's wonderful to see that we have the African perspective represented, Latin America, the perspective from Europe and from the Arab world. It is a beautiful panel, really. And I thank you for that to start, and also for the many perspectives that you've shared. There is one question in the chat that we will use, and that it's a good one, because it is one really asking for, and then what do we do with all this, and how will universities actually prepare for next such pandemics? Just as a point of reference, I heard the other day that the bestseller of the year in France was the book The Peste by Albert Camus, a book that now dates, but everybody went into libraries almost, it looks. If they didn't have the book at home, they went and bought it. What does it say? It says also that art has a lot to tell us, and the social sciences, humanities, to understand where we are today, what was the past, where do we come from, and where can we go? And I believe that the question by Glenn Chatelier is a little bit about that. So the question that you can see is, given that the COVID-19 pandemic is projected to be the first among many more to follow, I'm afraid it's not the first one. We have seen others like the pest, for instance. That's what came to my mind immediately, but also other coronaviruses that have unfortunately spread around the world, and Ebola was mentioned before, but others similarly. So given that the pandemic is projected to be among the many more to follow, how do universities work through research and community outreaches to cope with such realities and further become more focused on research and community empowerment? I think you showed that part. I think we could extend your question, Glenn. Apologies if that is not what you intended to do, but how also do we learn from this pandemic even better to move into the future? So you alluded to it a bit. You said Laszlo, in the beginning, where you said that budgets are being revisited, that governance structures have to actually take this into consideration, that you have to look at the opportunities, and that the government is actually behind these dynamics. So that's one opportunity. When I listened to you, Professor Mabizela, I heard very clearly this need to look at the community outside to ensure continuity of education, because education is at the heart of the solutions, that's where the solutions will come for the future, but that it has to be done in co-creation, if I understood you right. The tech is helpful, but it has many limitations that you could say. On the one hand, in Qatar, you say you had a 95% of internet access. In South Africa, it was maybe the opposite, 59%, if you revert the numbers, just to make una broma. But we have to reimagine the society. We have an opportunity. This crisis is an opportunity to get to something new. And you had a very important point there to me also, Jose Eguibar, when you said we have to go to interdisciplinarity, we have to go to more community engagement, we have to go to more contact with society. This volunteering work is extremely important, so that we have the opportunity to use the capacity, the inventiveness, the perspicacity of students to the full, and actually maximize the opportunities that are there for all those who enter a university to contribute to society differently. So the question, and then expanded a little bit. So let me start with Prof. Mabizela.
Thank you very much. This pandemic has taught us much, and it continues to teach us a lot. And one of the most important things is that pandemics know no political borders. And that is important because and it has also shown us that we are so interconnected. We are part of the same humanity. So the sooner we realize that there is no way in which we can have parts of the world progressing and others falling behind, and think that we are moving forward. We are part of the same human family, and that when things like this happen, and the whole world, every family is forced to stay indoors, and you realize just how important it is for us to work together. And of course, in terms of going forward and the fact that there will be many more pandemics, if we haven't learned anything from COVID-19, we will never learn anything. One, we need to work together. Your pain should be my pain, and we should create a better world, a more just, a more humane, a more caring, a more compassionate world. Because for as long as there are problems in some parts of the world, those will be problems to all of us. And so in terms of our education and our approach to education, we should have this global outlook and produce graduates that are critical and engaged citizens who will not be just content to see the world as it is, but can imagine a better world and can work with courage and conviction towards the realization of that better world. As I've said, a more just, a more humane, a more inclusive, a more compassionate, a fairer, and an inclusive world. So our entire approach to education should seek to produce those kinds of young people who will be agents of change and societal transformation. So in terms of the curriculum, let's learn from what this pandemic has taught us, that you cannot simply be inward looking. Let us be more outward looking. Of course, the issue of technology. And as I've indicated, we have really advanced significantly in technology. And one of my colleagues mentioned how collaboration using technology has been achieved, and so on and so forth. We have to look after this universe that we have. If we can't look after it, we will all die, because it's like a ship. It's like a ship in a sea. If there is a hole on one part of this ship, the whole ship will sink. So it's about us as part of the common humanity with a shared destiny, and that we instill this through our own education, through community engagement, and through research and finding common solutions. Thanks.
Thank you. You see behind me that the IAU has adopted Agenda 2030 as a backdrop to everything that we do. It is in our strategic plan, and I think you speak to many of these dimensions. Also in the latest issue of IAU Horizons, which was in great part created by Trine Jensen, this beautiful book. You have, in the second part, we have an in focus on imagining higher education in a post-pandemic world. And your colleague of all of you around the world, Phil Cotton, who was the Vice Chancellor of the University of Rwanda, said, we actually have to make sure that we find a better version of what we had before. So we don't build back better, we build better for the future together. And I think you all had some of the seeds that will allow to grow that new togetherness in a different way. So maybe you want to reflect. I'm conscious of time. It's already 6 to 4 here in Paris, different times in your part of the world. But at the same time, we can go over 10 minutes, and Prof. Mabizela, very sorry to invite you out and bring back in Laszlo Gurgley, because we have only 4 spaces on the screen. But can I give the floor to José Edibard to also react to this in 3 minutes, so that we all have an opportunity.
Of course, thank you very much. I think that the question is quite important, but because obviously we are more forced to do research, particularly in the areas related to COVID, but as I told you, also in other areas within an interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary approach, no? Trying to put together from social science, to biomedical science, for example, and try to resolve not these situations as you told us, also thinking about the future, no, and the future pandemic and how to confront it efficiently. There is also a very important point in that the community empowerment is nowadays one of the aspects I think that we are all of us thinking about, because it is quite important that the universities engage with the communities, with the government, with the politics in order to take the better decisions. And I want to end this interventions with one important aspect that is that the gender ideas. It is well demonstrated that the pandemics is pushing back a lot of research made by women, and I think it's quite important to take into account that point. We need to support women because these indoors conditions are affecting more women. They have less time than the men related, for example, to do research or these webinars and so on and so forth. So I think a good one politic in the universities and in general in the government take into account this gender bias that is worse for the women, and we need to develop all the public agenda in order to support women, particularly that ones that are engaged in research. Thank you very much again for invite us to share our ideas with all the universities that participate.
Thank you very much. I see that we will have 3 more days to discuss all this. There's so many very important points that we want to make, and we will have an opportunity. We will get back to you, and I hope that all you will be interested to maybe contribute to coming issues of our magazine or other platforms where we will be able to hear more about your views. Professor Khalid Al-Khanji, maybe you can elaborate on this also in 3 minutes, just to give a few more incentives on this.
Yes, thank you. I think especially the lockdown time gave us a really great opportunity to reflect, and reflection is a big part of our learning. And I think if we did our work, we would realize that, as my colleague said before, we are connected to the world, not only in the way that we can transmit viruses of one part in the world to another, but also we can transmit ideas, and we can connect with each other ideas and learn from each other. And with the technology, we can utilize that to really a big, to a big degree. Technology, social media, different platforms are not only for entertainment. They're really about idea and to the betterment of the human kind and moving to a better future. One of the things also that I think comes of our reflections is thinking about priorities in life. I mean, every human being was engaged in a different thing, and they were busy with their own things and their agendas, but with the reflection, they started to discover things that they missed from our life, reignite some passion that was forgotten because of time, because of different circumstances. So they were able to be more in touch with their own real feeling, real priorities, and think about them, and hopefully translating them into activities and change, and for us also translate them into a more productive agendas in higher education, whether in education and research or in social engagement. And the last thing, of course, was discovery, which by that I mean we were able to try new things. new, whether in our professional life, we tried new things. We made some mistakes we thought we would not make. We faced new challenges and we had to adapt to them. So we learned more about the different circumstances, and we also discover things about our own private life. But I think we were able to make sure and to have confidence that we can adapt to new circumstances and come out on the better side, hopefully at the end of this. And that means that's a big lesson for humankind.
No,
And thank you so much.
And I think through this point, you also touch on another one that Professor Egibar and Professor Mabizela also made, is we are able to continue everything that we knew before, but we had more difficulty in reinventing new things, also finding new ways to develop new kinds of connections. I hope that out of this webinar, for instance, this will be an opportunity for the University of Qatar, the University of Buap, the University in Rhodes, or the University in Budapest. You will have the opportunity to actually connect in a different way and to work together on issues of importance. I will give the floor now to Laszlo Gurgley as well.
Thank you. I just very briefly, I would like to just strengthen my colleague's statement or conclusions that this pandemic situation, more than 1 year elapsed, and this is a very long period. Of course, we have learned a lot from this, but we say that this is too long, and even though we had a lot of developments, especially in the digitalization, it is a very big question that how sustainable this development is, how we can continue after the pandemic situation. Why do I say this? Definitely there are some specialties or professions where the full online teaching is a feasible solution. But definitely it is not feasible for our university, for engineering fields. We need to meet, we need to have discussion in person, we need to have a teamwork together in person, and so on and so on. Besides the fact that we also have some study activities and research activities which require the presence of the students and the instructors, like laboratory works or experiments or whatever. So this is one thing. The other thing is that the human being requires the personal contact. So even though we have learned a lot of things from this pandemic situation, and we see the opportunities for the future, we believe that we can combine the developed online tools and new means of activities with the old-fashioned ones, if I say this. And I believe that that's going to be a very, very productive and efficient way of the education and research. Yes, and the other important conclusion is that now we can say that we are well prepared for such a situation. So next time, hopefully, it's not going to be in the near future. But if anyhow it happens in the future, then we will be much more prepared than for this pandemic situation.
We hope so, because every pandemic comes with its own logic again, probably. I would like, time is unfortunately over. I will invite my colleague back into the screen as well. Because he will be also in contact with many of you. I count on your 4 universities to be the first ones to complete the questionnaire. And you will be recognized for that. Obviously, you already participated in the pilot, so thank you very much for that, because you helped improve the questionnaire already. We look forward to receiving a lot of responses so that these dynamics that you shed light on today will receive many more insights from all around the world, so that we can then as well synthesize, analyze, also give back to the diversity of approaches, definitely, so that we will not brush everything with one stroke out of Paris here, but certainly recognize also the diversity. But hopefully that will fuel the discussions for the next steps, and certainly inform many of the debates that will take place at the UNESCO World Higher Education Conference, of which the IAU is one of the key partners, because we want to have the voice of higher education heard by the governments that are represented by UNESCO and at that conference, and so that governments understand that university matters and that universities are a pillar in our societies, and they have so many ramifications everywhere, and they are definitely part of the solution. So thank you for your wonderful insights. Always sorry to see that we are running out of time, which at the same time is a very good sign. And thank you very much for the very high quality of your interventions. Professor Mabizela, I hope you will not be cross with me because we can't show you on the screen, but all for a very warm thank you together with Giorgio. We want to thank you definitely, and we will be back in touch with you, with the participants today, with all those who registered beyond this and could not make it today, but will watch the recordings. So thank you for your wonderful input, and we look forward to further conversations on these important issues in the months to come. Have a very good continuation of the day. Giorgio?
Thank you. I just want to thank you all. And please contribute to the survey, because it's very important, and only with your contribution we can produce a very interesting report for the World Higher Education Conference, but also for the general public interest in higher education. Thank you very much, and to the next webinar.